Good morning, West Main family. Today we're going to dive into a study of the subject of compromise. You know, compromise is a strange thing because there are some times when it's good and there are some times when it very much is not. You know, we all want to get a good deal. There was a period of time when we were younger that I really liked to go to auctions. And I remember one time I went to the auction, and this particular auction that I would frequent, they had a Thursday night sale, and they had two rooms. They had the room with all the nice furniture, and then they had the room with all of the junk, I guess you'd say. And in the junk room is where you'd really find the good deals. So I'd go and I'd come a little later in the evening because they had a rule. If you bought it, you had to haul it. So some of the other bidders would have already bought enough stuff to fill their car or van or truck, and they couldn't buy anymore. So later in the night, you'd get better deals. But one night I went and they had 5 tables of books, mostly westerns and romance novels, paperback books that clearly a used bookstore went out of business or needed to get rid of their stock. And the auctioneer, typically what they'd do is they'd say, well, the best pick of 5 or 10, and they'd start that and they'd go through until all the books were gone. But it was already like 11 o'clock at night. The auctioneer looked at his watch. He was disappointed at how late it was. He didn't want to be there all night long. So he said, what will somebody give me for all of these books? Well, he started the bidding, I think at $100. Nobody bid. He said, look at all these books. It's like an entire bookstore worth of books. And then when nobody bid, he said, okay, how about let's start me at $50. Nobody bid. Start me at $20. Nobody bid. He said, what will somebody give me? I said, I'll give you $1. Well, sure enough, somebody bid 2 and I bid 3, and I bought, I don't know, it must have been 1,000 books for $3. And the only reason I got that deal is because I had a pickup out front with a full 8-foot bed completely empty, and nobody else had the room to haul them off. You should have seen Lenora's face when I drove up late that night and started shoveling books into our garage with a snow shovel. And she said, what do we need all these books for? And I said, well, I don't know, but I got them all for $3. You see the deal. It just seemed like it couldn't be passed up. So compromise in some ways has to do with the deal. We all want to get a bargain. We all want the seller to compromise and to give us something, or at least some benefit that we didn't have before. So sometimes compromise is a good thing. When it isn't, is when you compromise with someone who isn't trustworthy. You see, a compromise can be good if both parties are benefiting from it. But what if you can't trust that other person? What if you're compromising something that is valuable and meaningful, that is crucial to you, and that other is making promises they're never going to keep, and they're just, in essence, swindling you? Well, you see, when it comes to the issue of compromise for the Christian, it's never about trading a little bit for something else and getting a good bargain for both parties. Because if we ever compromise, we're compromising with the prince of liars. The devil, if he makes compromises, and he'll try to do it all day, the problem is that he has nothing to offer us of value. Not only that, is that the only thing he's willing to accept in exchange for that compromise is that which we cannot give, because the only thing of value we have to offer is our souls. And so the devil is one that cannot be compromised with, because he can never be trusted. And he always, every single time, promises things he doesn't intend to deliver. It's kind of like the old fable, Russian fable about the hunter who was in the woods and he's been tracking a bear, and he makes a bargain with that bear. And the bargain he makes with him is the bear says, whoa, don't shoot at me. And it's a fable. We know bears don't talk, but don't shoot at me. And he says, well, I want a fur coat. And the bear says, well, then we can make a compromise, because I want a full belly. Well, as the fable says, the hunter left with a fur coat and the bear left with a full belly, but only one of them really came out on top. That's how it always is when you compromise with the devil. Because the devil is deceiver. He's a liar. And so through temptation, trying to entice us to give up our integrity, our virtue, as he tries to give us to compromise our families for money or for our jobs or whatever he tries, our morality for perceived emotion or love, whatever it is, the devil is one that we can never compromise with, because our enemy will never really give anything, and all he wants is to take everything. In John chapter 15, verses 18 and 19, Jesus addresses this when he says, if the world hates me, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love its own. Yet because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. And so he tells us, he says, you can't make a bargain with a world that despises and wants nothing more than to destroy you. There's no trust that can ever be built there. And the only thing we would have to compromise with would be the only thing of value we have, which is our souls. Therefore, compromise for the Christian is simply never an option when it comes to our faith. And it must be overcome. There's just a few brief points I want to share about this. First of all, the easy way, and this is a principle that applies in all of life, particularly in our faith, but in all of life, the easy way is never the victorious way. We know this is true. There's never been a great athlete who got to the top by just being lazy about it. No, it was all practice and dedication. There's never been someone in business who made it to the top who didn't work and devote themselves to that task. Compromise, it's been said, is simply changing the question to fit the answer. In other words, when we compromise in any of these areas, but particularly in our faith, what we're doing is we're really just giving up everything. It's changing the question to fit the answer. You see, oftentimes it's like electricity. Compromise entices us to follow the path of least resistance. But that's never the path to victory, to greatness, or to success. Such action destroys the very purpose of what we are, who we are, and what we're to do. I love the little story about a family. Lenore and I relate to this well because, we moved from the big city of Michigan and now we're on a little acreage here in Mississippi, and it's been a grand adventure and a learning experience for us. But it's been told of a New York family who moved from the big city and they bought a big ranch. And they, began to figure out what they were going to call the ranch. And one person wanted to be called the Lazy Susan or the Lazy S, and another one said the Susie Q, and another one said, I'd rather it be called the Bar J, and another one said the Flying W. And finally, the father was in town one day and somebody said, "Did you ever decide on the name of your ranch?" He said, "Yeah, we called it the Bar J, Susie Q, Flying W, Lazy Y Ranch." And they said, "Okay, well, how's that going?" And he said, "Not very well. None of the cattle survived the branding." Well, it's kind of like that when it comes to compromise of our faith. Compromise of our values is that it might seem like it's good to meet in the middle, or to give up a little bit more of our family for our career, or to give up a little bit more of our virtue to please others, or whatever it may be. But the result is it never is victorious. In the end, the compromise just leads to destruction. You see, victory will require an unyielding, an uncompromising faith. And the knowledge that God will be on our side through and above everything should give us great comfort. I've quoted many times, and I will many more, a passage I love at the end of Romans chapter 8, where it says, "In all these things we're more than conquerors." But then he lists all the things that we as conquerors overcome. He said, "For I am persuaded that neither life nor death, nor angels nor principalities, nor things present, nor things to come, neither height nor depth, nor any other created thing will be able to separate us from the love of God which is in Christ Jesus our Lord." He said, we are victorious over everything in this world if we remain solid and strong, uncompromising in our faith. We're more than conquerors. The easy way is never the victorious way. We also realize that compromise, at its essence, compromise when we're now if we're just getting a bargain and making a deal on an automobile or something else, that's one thing. But to compromise anything in regard to our faith, our family, our integrity, our belief, compromise is no more than simply a betrayal. You see, to water down our faith is to dilute the importance of Christ in our lives. God would rather have us not follow Him than to half-heartedly do so. That's why He tells us in Revelation 3:15 and 16, "I know thy works, I know that you're neither hot nor cold, and that I wish that you were hot or cold. So then because you are lukewarm and neither cold or hot, I will spew you, spit you out of my mouth." You see, He says we've got to be wholeheartedly committed to Him, not compromising even in the slightest. Simply put, it is a matter for us of ownership. We're the Lord's. If we really have that true relationship with Him, we're His, wholly and completely, without reservation. And if we would own Him, the Bible says He will own us. If we'll stand up and not compromise and be His, wholly and completely, no matter who likes it or who doesn't, then it says He will own us in the day of judgment. But if we compromise that, then He'll deny us in the day of judgment. In Matthew chapter 10, Jesus says this quite plainly as He states starting in verse 32, "Therefore whoever confesses me before men, I will also confess before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I will deny him before my Father who is in heaven." Plainly stated, Jesus says, if you compromise me, I'll compromise you. Don't compromise your faith. Don't compromise. It's a betrayal. Which leads us to a third observation, and that is victory over compromise. How do we, in this world of wheeling and dealing, how do we overcome compromise? Well, victory over compromise is found in real dedication. Quite simply, we have to decide to be unshakable. I've heard Christians make statements like, well, we see the early Christians were persecuted. We don't know what we do if we're persecuted. Brethren, we should all know what we do. Now, would there be those who may buckle in the moment? Maybe. But no soldier goes into the Army or Marine Corps or whatever service he serves in saying, well, I don't know what I'll do if I'm on the battlefield. I guess I'll just find out when that time comes. No. Now, there will be cowards who run, but every one of them had decided that no matter what circumstance they're in, they decided, they determined that they were committed to the cause. We have to be committed to the cause of Christ, determined. And that's how, when the moment we're tempted to compromise comes, that's how we overcome it. We must choose to do the right thing before the moment comes when we need to do the right thing. We must have determined in our heart that each and every day, regardless of circumstances, we're going to follow Him. That's why Joshua said in Joshua 24 and verse 15, "And if it seems evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose ye this day whom ye shall serve." whether the gods which your forefathers served, which were on this side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you now dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. He had already decided beforehand that he would be dedicated to the Lord. That's what dedication really is. I read a story of fighters in Nepal when Nepal was going through their civil war and they were trying to gain their freedom and independence. There were Western advisors to their military, and they needed to take this particular objective. And the Western advisors pulled in these Nepalese fighters, and they told them, they said, we think the best way for you to do it would be to jump in as paratroopers. And the Nepalese, they didn't know what that was. They said, what does that mean? They said, oh, you jump out of airplanes right to the spot where you need to take the objective. And they looked terrified by this, and they got aside and they began to talk, and finally they came back to their advisors, and they said, well, we've decided we'll do it, but we just have one request. We'd like you to fly low and over swampy ground. Well, the advisors were shocked. They didn't realize that they'd never explained that there were parachutes involved. And what really impressed them was these men had agreed to jump out of airplanes before they knew there were parachutes. You see, they had already decided when they took up the war for their independence, they had decided that no matter what the cost, no matter what was asked of them, no matter what they had to do, they were committed. They were going to fulfill their duty and not compromise. Victory over compromise is found in absolute, predetermined dedication. You see, if we're to choose Christ, it means that we have to choose uncompromising dedication, which requires daily recommitment. You see, it tells us in 2 Timothy 2:15, be diligent. Some versions say, study to show yourself approved. A workman who needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. That's study. Or like it says of the Bereans, they search the scriptures daily. You see, that is a life of constant rededication. As it would say in Romans chapter 12, I urge you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of Christ, to present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed. It could just as well say, be not compromising. Don't compromise with this world, but be ye transformed. And the implication there is day by day, we recommit ourselves as living sacrifices to Him. We redetermine every day that whatever comes tomorrow, we already have decided what we'll do. We're not going to compromise. Because our enemy, he can't be trusted. He has nothing to offer us. And the only thing we have to give is the one thing we can't. Our integrity, our souls. So I encourage you this week, as you're having this time during pandemic and social distancing and quarantine, all the things that are involved right now, rededicate. Determine. Go to God in prayer and say, Lord, for the rest of my life, I'm deciding now. I'm going to be yours, no matter what. If you have any needs, we hope that you'll reach out to church leaders, that you'll let us be there for you and encourage you. We love you. Please stay safe. Please continue to stay happy in the Lord. And above all, stay healthy. God bless you.